Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen, Forrest over here. I know it's like 3 a.m. Eastern time and a little bit earlier than that as far as the time, about an hour or two, three, however many hours you're watching this. So I want to say good, very early morning to the night owls who are still awake watching whatever you're watching or listening to. But also, to the other side, if I remember correctly, you guys would probably still be you guys are probably in the early morning hours, if not. Uh, yeah, I think I think people on the other side would, for the most part, be in the early morning hours, if not afternoon as well. So, good morning to those guys over there as well. I could be wrong with the time differences. Don't at me at the time zones. I don't know at what time it is across the world. I'm just saying it like I'm seeing it. Alright. So, yeah, as you can tell from the title and by the preview picture, I am reading I'm going to be doing a third part of reading the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, not the Five Nights at Freddy's novel, based on the movie. I actually have already narrowed this down to where I'll be doing three more parts, this included. Um, this part including the three parts. Because I got it narrowed down to where I'll be reading chapter 7 through 13 for this part, and then 14 through 21. Yeah, 14 through 20 for the second one, and then 21 through 25 for that final minute. All right, so without further ado, we're just gonna go ahead and get right straight into it. Go ahead and put that on live chat so if anything happens there. Also, a bit of a disclaimer that I'm gonna have to start saying every time I do this. Um, Heck, it may not actually be a bad idea to put it up as a pinned comment now that I think about it. But pretty much, if I'm in the middle of reading the book, I cannot read chat. But if there's a part of the book where I'm there's a space in between sections of the chapter, or I'm at the very end of the chapter, I will look at chat real quick before I continue on with the story. With that being said, let's just go ahead and get started. I just drank a pop, so hopefully I stay awake before up until I finish. So let's just see what happens. So now we are starting Mike's first night as a security guard and the aftermath of that whole shebang. Let's see what happens. Chapter 7. Mike stood next to the chair behind the desk and stared at the CCTV monitors. His gaze was locked on the middle one, which provided an exterior view of the building Mike was in. Apparently, flipping the breaker lever had done more than get the interior lights back on. It had also tripped whatever switch controlled the outside lights. Staring at the lights on the monitor now, Mike wasn't sure whether seeing the exterior lit up would have encouraged him or discouraged him from coming inside. The garish signage was supposed to be welcoming, he was sure, but it had the opposite effect on Mike. Maybe that was because the lights, although on, were constantly flickering, alternately casting a harsh glare and uninviting shadows out from the sprawling building. Resembling a slumped sleeping giant in the warring glare and shadows, the building clearly had seen better days. Roofs sagging, paint peeling, gutters dangling, and the building's windows were boarded over. Even so, the CCTV monitor revealed a lit up, faded red sign that read Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. In the blossom of a sputtering spotlight, a cutout of the famed dude himself, the big brown bear Mike had seen on the hallway posters, looked out over the empty parking lot. The bear's full-toothed grin was probably supposed to shout, "Come on in!" Again, it had the opposite effect on Mike. Sighing, Mike looked at the VCR. Raglan had told Mike to look for a tape in the desk's top drawer. Mike reached out and pulled that drawer open. Sure enough, a VCR tape sat next to a few pins. Mike grabbed the tape before he sat in the desk's rolling gray vinyl office chair. Then he shoved the tape into the old VCR. He hit the power button on the TV. Before I continue, quick show of hands, how many of you grew up with a VCR like I had? For those of you that don't know what a VCR is, back in the days up until I think it was like the mid 2000s, we had these video cassettes, um, that we put into the VCR. That's pretty much what it does. It plays VHS tapes. The only problem with those VHS tapes was that sometimes, if you were very unlucky, the tape could actually cut the tape from the film that's on the tape could get caught and sometimes it can come out, which really sucked about them. So basically, if they got caught, you couldn't reel it up if you knew what to do and how to do it. But otherwise, yeah, it was really fun for its time. It was really good. The only problem was when that tape gets caught, you better hope that tape can be reeled up, because if not, well, you're gonna have to buy another one. And I don't think people want to buy two copies of the same movie because of some bullcrap with the V. That's also probably why it kind of became obsolete once the option to buy them on DVD was a thing. Because with DVDs, you could have the same issue where if a DVD is so fucking dirty, you have to clean it, otherwise it's just going to skip scene after scene after scene. I would know this because I've had many a DVDs that have done that because of how dirty they are. And, even when you try to clean it, it can still be a pain in the ass. It can still be a pain in the ass trying to play sometimes. But yeah, I do remember the VCR tapes. I do remember them very well. Getting back to the story. A click, a whir, and a thunk, and a few wavy tracking lines crackled onto the TV screen. Let me see if we can actually find this, let me see if we can actually do that. Here, hold on a second. A click, a word, a thunk, and a few wavy tracking lines crackled onto the TV screen. Statically old-timey cartoon music played, and the tracking lines gave way to a graphic version of Freddy Fazbear and the pizzeria's logo. It'd be really fun if we could actually get that. You know what I'm saying? Look up Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria training video. It'd be really funny. It'd be really cool if they had that. I think some people actually did do that before. Let me see here. I Oh, yes, the VHS. Oh, there you go.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, where fantasy and fun come to life. Hit it, guys. We're going to have so much fun together.
Yeah, there you go. Let me see though. Um, hmm. Yeah, sadly they don't seem to have that, but oh well. That would have been really nice if they did. Getting back to the story now. Mike raised an eyebrow at the tiny music, but he leaned back in the chair and put his attention on the TV screen as the logo dissolved into a title. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Security Brief. The cartoon music faded and loud 80s rock music began. Hmm. Yeah, we define 80s rock music. Huh, it actually is copyright free 80s rock music. Let's see here. Yeah, it's not really doing anything, so, yeah. Just picture some random 80s rock music, and there you go. Mike watched the tape's title break into a gazillion pixels as the title was replaced by a large restaurant dining room filled with happy families, eating, talking, and laughing. A dozen or so little kids played or danced in the aisles between the tables. A merry-faced woman with curly strawberry blonde hair beamed at the camera. Her jolliness would have put Santa to shame. Mike found himself leaning back farther, as if he could escape the woman's merriment. The woman had pretty blue eyes and pouty, red-painted lips that she stretched into a big smile as she sang out, "Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, a magical place for kids and grown-ups alike. A place where fantasy and fun come to life." The woman flung out her arms, and for a second Mike thought she was going to twirl with glee, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "If you're watching this video, it means you've been selected as Freddy's newest security guard. Congratulations! We're going to have so much fun together." Mike raised an eyebrow. "We are?" he asked the TV screen. He shook his head as he kept watching. On the TV, the dining room scene and the woman flip-flopped away, and then the woman reappeared in front of a packed, brightly lit arcade. The arcade lined with full-sized games, pinball machines, skee-ball machines, as well as a bunch of games Mike didn't recognize, featured a huge network of plastic towers and tunnels. These crisscrossed over a giant plastic ball pit. Even without all the Boy Scout little kids playing, it was clear the place was any child's dream playground. The woman began speaking again. "The genius who created Fazbear Entertainment opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria to indulge in his two greatest passions, family-friendly fun and cutting-edge animatronic technology." On the screen, the arcade swirled into a black hole, and another room burst into view. Mike didn't think this room looked like nearly as much fun. Stuffed full of metal shelves and work tables, the room on the screen now was filled with what looked like robotic parts. In the center of the room, a reclining metal chair was occupied by an unmoving animatronic. It was tough to tell what the animatronic was meant to be. Mike could only see some blonde at the edges of an expanse of metal endoskeleton and a tangle of wires. A white-coated man, Mike guessed was the technician, was probing at the wires with a tool that looked like a cross between a pair of pliers and a pair of sniping shears. Hello, Daniel Barry. How you doing tonight? The tool was almost evil-looking, sharp and hard. The woman reappeared on the screen. Still looking relentlessly happy, she trilled, "State-of-the-art robotic engineering enables our characters to interact with guests in truly lifelike fashion, while cleverly concealed rechargeable lithium cells give the characters limited range to roam free." The woman rose up on her tiptoes. "Safety first!" The screen suddenly went dark, then the woman reappeared. Now she stood in front of an expanse of velvety red stage curtains. "This should be good," Mike muttered. The woman on the screen said in hyped up tones, "Let's introduce you to the stars of the show. Hit it, guys!" The woman made a sweeping gesture with her left arm. The woman on the screen disappeared, and the TV was filled with the image of a hand striking a palm-sized red plastic button. The label above the button read, "Showtime!" The curtains once again filled the TV screen. The woman was no longer in front of them, and the curtains were starting to part. An inch, 2, 3, 4. The hems of the curtains fluttered as they moved. And then, the image on the screen froze and then dissolved into a blur of tracking lines. Mike leaned forward and whacked the side of the small TV. He didn't think it would do any good, but the TV emitted the sound of distorted laughter, and the woman suddenly reappeared on the screen. She now stood in front of the pleated, pulled-back curtain. She was looking to her right, apparently toward whatever was on the now exposed stage. "Adorable, aren't they?" the woman asked, using a cutesy voice. "These cuddly critters and the proprietary technology that brings them to life are now your sacred duty to protect. Keep them safe, and help ensure that Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria is here to delight, dazzle, and entertain for years to come." The screen went black. Mike stared at it. "Seriously?" he asked aloud. The desk chair let out a squeal as Mike leaned forward and pulled the tape from the VCR. He stuck it back into the desk drawer and then shifted his attention to the CCTV monitors. There were 9 of them. Each one was streaming footage of various rooms in the restaurant, or some angle of the restaurant's exterior or its surroundings. All of the images were black and white, and they were blurry, low resolution. The obscure monochromatic scenes reminded Mike of set-in shots in old horror movies. Even though the areas appeared to be empty, they clearly hinted at trouble lurking off-screen. They were supremely creepy. Mike lifted his gaze and looked around the room again. His attention landed on the lone locker. Randomly, his mind was suddenly filled with the image of seeing one of the boys in his school. Bobby, a poor skinny kid who was teased relentlessly, being stuffed into his locker. The little hairs on the back of Mike's arms bristled as he looked at the slats at the top of the locker. What exactly was in the thing? Mike tried to disarm the Mike tried to dismiss the question, but he knew he wouldn't be able to settle until he satisfied himself that the locker was empty, or that it was at least filled with something benign and inanimate. Leaving his backpack on the desk next to the TV, Mike got up and walked over to the locker. Hesitating only a second, he reached out and yanked on the locker's unsecured lock. The locker door swung open and slapped back against the wall with a clang as Mike looked into the locker. His gaze met the bug eyes of a rosy-cheeked, grinning little boy. Mike yelped and immediately slammed the locker door shut again. He backed away from the locker and stared at it. His heart felt like it was detonating on his chest. What the hell was that? Mike's brain provided him with a replay of what he'd seen. He'd seen a boy. Shiny skin. too colorful face, too much white in the eyes, and most important, the boy was very, very puny. Conclusion, it wasn't a real boy. Mike rolled his eyes at his own skittishness. He breathed in and out evenly, and then he stepped forward. This time Mike pulled the locker door open slowly. Sitting on the locker's top shelf, the boy gazed at Mike placidly. Not a boy, a doll. The doll wore a pinstriped propeller-topped cap and held a satiny red balloon. The doll was too short to have been mistaken for a real child. Unless you'd gotten yourself worked into a jump at your own shadow state of high anxiety. I really need to calm down, Mike said. The boy doll didn't agree, but it didn't disagree either. The boy's grin, however, did make Mike feel like the doll was laughing at him. Mike looked at the doll's bulging eyes. Little worms of unease crawled up Mike's neck. He quickly reached down and turned the doll's head so its face was aimed toward the back of the locker. There, balloon boy, Mike said. Laugh at that. Mike dropped his gaze from the doll and inspected the rest of the locker, wanting to be sure it didn't hold any more creeptastic toys. Thankfully, it didn't. There were only two other things in the locker. One was great. A flashlight. One of the big black ones that could be used as a weapon if necessary. Mike really hoped it wouldn't be necessary. The second thing in the locker was a Freddy Fazbear branded red security vest. Mike studied the vest for a second, then he shrugged. Why not? Mike tugged the vest from its wire hanger. Mike grabbed the flashlight, gave Balloon Boy one last glance. To be honest, he wanted to make sure it was still turned toward the back of the locker, and shut the locker door. Stepping over to the desk, he set the flashlight where he'd be able to grab it quickly if the power went out again. Then he slipped on the vest. He might as well look the part. Hey, sometimes you gotta get that security guard aesthetic, you know? Yeah? Armed now with a hefty flashlight and a determination not to be so on edge, Mike decided he'd be more comfortable than if he explored his surroundings a bit. The office itself didn't feel like much of a safe haven, and so Mike wanted to know what else the building held. He decided to start with the main dining room he'd seen in the video. Mike left the office and headed back down the main hall. Bypassing all the closed doors, not because he was afraid of what was behind them, nope, not afraid at all, Mike retraced his steps back to the lobby. As he went, he showed his flashlight every which way. He didn't see much that he hadn't noticed before, except he did see that the hallway ceiling had intercom speakers, like the one in the office. He figured they were probably all over the restaurant. When Mike reached the lobby, he turned toward the archway. Then he strode through it and looked around. Although the building's power was full on, the cavernous dining area, it had to be at least 100 feet square, was still filled with puddles of black and gray and the palest of dirty yellow. Mike looked up and he saw that the yellow came from moonlight shining through a bunk of dirty skylights. Mike looked around and he saw a light switch to the left of the archway. He took a step toward it, but then he remembered Raglan's warnings about the electrical system. He didn't want to risk plunging the entire building into a pitch darkness again, so he flicked on his flashlight. As soon as Mike aimed his flashlight at the expanse in front of him, he kind of wished he hadn't turned it on. The scene was bleak. Maybe if Mike hadn't watched the video, he wouldn't have been as put off by the vacant, filthy, desolate room. Mike's mind, however, was still filled with the bright, happy scenes from the video. He'd expected to find a colorful room filled with tables. Instead, he was looking at a wasteland. Only a few tables remained, and these were covered with dust or filthy, torn tablecloths. A few toppled stacks of chairs were scattered around the room. The black and white floor was littered with debris. Party hats, paper plates, napkins, empty cups. Taking one of the cups, Mike walked toward the two stages on the opposite side of the room. One of the stages was covered with an older version of the red curtain he'd seen in the video. The velvet on the curtain was matted, and the red was faded. Over a smaller stage to the left, a purple curtain with gold stars sagged. Mike recognized it from the power in the hallway, from the poster in the hallway. He sincerely hoped the fox from the poster wasn't lurking behind the curtain. To counter the sudden melancholy of the neglected and forgotten dining room had created, Mike whistled loudly. The sound rang through the room, swirling out away from him, and then returning. It reminded him of the way his words had echoed back to him in the lobby. Weird. Mike shook his head, reminding himself that he had decided not to be spooked. He whistled again, even louder. He started to take a step forward. A loud clatter jerked Mike into full startle. He sucked in a gap and snapped his flashlight beam toward the sound. His flashlight's rays were aimed at the curtains that covered the stage. What was back there? Was someone else here? Hello? Mike called out. As soon as he thought the word, he regretted it. How many times had he laughed at a character in a movie when they called out, hello? If someone was here, it probably wasn't someone up to any good. And now Mike had announced his presence and his exact location. Brilliant. Mike kept his flashlight aimed at the curtains. They didn't move. Staying very, very still, Mike listened. He heard nothing, not even his own breathing. Mike realized he'd stopped breathing. He started again. Shining his light into a full circle, Mike decided there was way too many potential hiding spots in the room, not the least of which was behind the closed curtains. The flashlight and the wimpy moonlight didn't give him even close to an acceptable view of the area around him. Mike turned and strode to the light switch. Using it was worth the risk. Mike reached the switch quickly. He flipped it upward. Nothing happened. Mike flipped the switch up and down several times. Click, click, click. No light. Perfect, Mike said. The word toyed with him the same way his whistle had. Mike decided to keep his mouth closed from now on. For a second, Mike thought about retreating back to the office. But if someone was in here, wasn't it his job to find them? I'm not getting paid enough for this, Mike thought. Even so, he stepped away from the light switch. Taking a deep breath, he advanced farther into the room. Feeling vulnerable out in the middle of the room, Mike decided to hug the right wall. That wall, he noticed, was covered with children's drawings. Maybe 100 or more stick figure drawings, not unlike many of Abby's masterpieces, plastered the dining room's wall-like wallpaper. Yellowed and curling, the drawings fluttered as Mike passed them. Although Mike's flashlight beam illuminated the drawings, he gave them the only cursory attention. His focus was on the main stage. That was where the sound had come from. Past the drawings, Mike reached a short flight of stairs that led up to the stage. Near the steps, a hand-sized red button was on the wall. It was the button from the video. The Showtime letters above it were faded, barely legible. If Mike hadn't known what it said, he might not have been able to piece the word together. Mike aimed his flashlight at the button. He shook his head. No way in hell was he going to press that thing. Mike passed by the button. He climbed the steps up to the stage. Making sure to walk far enough in front of the curtains that he was beyond arm's reach of anything that might want to come out from behind them, Mike stepped softly over the dusty wood stage floor until he reached the middle of the stage, where the two sides of the curtain met. He shone his light at the half-inch gap between them. Straightening his posture, his upper shoulders back, soldier-like stance would prepare him for whatever he was about to face, Mike reached out and took the edge of the curtain in his left hand. The velvet was crusty beneath his fingertips. Mike pulled the curtain farther back. Leading with his flashlight, he poked his head behind the curtain. When Mike's flashlight beam landed on the first grinning big-toothed mouth, the beam immediately jerked away. That took the light to another massive grin, and another. Stunned and awed by the size of the tooth-filled mouths he was seeing, Mike steadied his light and aimed it so it illuminated as wide a view as possible. As soon as he took in the whole scene, his awe morphed into dread. Mike immediately stepped back, still clutching the curtain in his left hand, not because he wanted to, but because his fingers had spastically clamped on the velvet material. He retreated. The curtain came with him, pulling up and away from the stage floor and opening a wider gap. Mike swept his flashlight left and right, and then he quickly shot the light away from what he was seeing. Finally dropping the curtain, Mike turned. He didn't bother to head for the stage stairs. He just leaped off the stage and started hot-footing it through the dining room. As Mike ran, his brain provided him with a recap of what he'd just seen. The huge white eyes that hovered above all the teething grins that had sent him scampering away like a bunny rabbit pursued by a hawk. The eyes. Bunny rabbit. Had Mike really seen what he thought he'd seen? A chill cascaded through Mike's body like a freezing waterfall. He ran faster. Mike tried to tell himself that his brain was playing tricks on him. He hadn't seen what he thought he'd seen. But he knew he was lying to himself. Just as Mike had dropped the curtain, one set of white eyes, the set that belonged to the big blue bunny, had shifted. It had watched Mike's retreat. Chapter 8. Sticking to his trusty nighttime routine was more than a little challenging for Mike, given the circumstances. A multitude of obstacles stood between Mike and the normal flow of his bedtime ritual. First, of course, there was the fact that he was at work. He hadn't been hired to sleep. But to heck with that. Who was going to know if he slept instead of watching the creepy monitors? Second, there was the contents of the building Mike was in. As much as he tried to convince himself that he hadn't seen the bluish-purple bunny move its eyes to watch him, he knew he had. If the bunny could watch him, what else could it do? What else could the other animatronics do? Mike had assumed they were powered down. But were they? Third, Mike wasn't tired. He was too freaked out to be tired. But then, that's what the pills were for. Mike pondered these and other issues for an hour or so after he returned to the office. He also watched the office door, which he'd locked. When nothing had come to get him during that hour, Mike had decided to stick to his well-established bedtime habits. But first, he dragged one of the filing cabinets, the battered one, over to the door. Locking the in and the scratches on the door, he wondered if he wasn't the first one to use the cabinet as a barricade. If so, what did the scratches mean? He didn't let himself think about it. Returning to the desk, Mike looked at the chair. Not ideal for sleeping, but if he put his head on the desk, he could make it work. Mike opened his backpack and started pulling out what he needed. Pills? Check. Bottle of water? Check. Cassette player? Check. Dream theory? Check. Alarm clock? Mike looked down at his watch. He decided to use his watch as his alarm clock instead of bringing his clock from home. He set his watch alarm now. Mike laid the paperback book next to the cassette player. Then he took his pill. Looking at the door one last time, Mike shifted his gaze to the wall clock opposite the desk. The hour hand was halfway between midnight and 1 a.m. Mike looked at all the monitors in turn. Parking lot, lobby, hallways, kitchen, arcade, dining room, storage room, back of the restaurant, front of the restaurant, all empty, all quiet. Mike put his head down on his folded arms. He closed his eyes. Besides his bed, of course, there was one piece of Mike's nightly arsenal that he hadn't brought with him. The poster. But even so, when he closed his eyes, he immediately saw the swaying pine trees. He heard the breeze, too. Drifting into unconsciousness, Mike twitched and frowned. Was that a breeze he was hearing? It didn't sound quite right. It sounded more like static than a breeze, as if he was hearing the scratchy modulation of feedback coming through a speaker, maybe an intercom. This thought almost derailed Mike's descent into dreamland, but the pull of the pine tree's undulation was too strong. Mike ignored the crackling that marred the soothing sound of the breeze. He let the pine trees drop him into the scene that was so familiar to him. The scene, however, didn't flow smoothly in Mike's mind tonight. It came in snatches. Gyrating tree branches, orange toy airplane flying through the air, a spray of ketchup. How about some burgers with that ketchup, hon? Mike's dad asks. Thump. Fizz. Mike's mom's voice calls out, keep an eye on your brother. Frisbee whizzing. Car engine revving. 12-year-old Mike shouts, Garrett! Branches slapping Mike's face. Black car zooming away. Garrett's pale face in the car's back window. Mike opens his mouth to scream, and for once the scream makes it out of his mouth. Garrett! Mike watches the black car disappear around a bend. Then, Mike hears children laughing. The sound comes from behind him. Confused, Mike turns. 5 children stand in the middle of the now empty road. One of them wears a paper top hat. One has a paper bib tied around his neck. One wears paper rabbit ears on her head. One holds a paper hook. The 5th child, a blond boy with icy blue eyes, stands out in front of the other children. He has no paper props. Mike stares at the blond boy. Who are you? He asks. How did you get here? The boy says nothing. In the periphery of Mike's vision, he sees the other children playing. For a moment they seem strangely abstract, oversimplified. They're almost two-dimensional, like paper dolls instead of real children. As soon as Mike turns and looks at the children full on, though, the children are perfectly real. Mike shifts his gaze back to the blond boy. As his focus transitions, he gets the same cardboard cutout impression of the kids. Quickly reorienting to look at the kids straight on, the flattered effect disappears again. Mike frowns, baffled. As bewildered as he feels, however, Mike has a little fire of exhilaration flickering in his belly. Whatever's happening is new, different than anything he's seen before. Mike steps toward the blond boy as he gestures back over his shoulder to where the car disappeared. Did you see that car? Mike asks. Did you see what happened? The blond boy studies Mike as if Mike is an ant invading a picnic. Mike tries again. Did you see who took my brother? The blond boy smiles. Beyond him, the other children are back in 2D, like they've stepped off the page of a book. Mike looks directly at the children. They are real again. Once, twice, 3 times. Mike adjusts his gaze, focusing, unfocusing, focusing, unfocusing, focusing, unfocusing. The children turn into flattened images and then swell back into 3D. Finally, the children abruptly scatter. All 5 of the kids run. They go in 5 different directions. Mike calls out, Wait! He looks from one fleeing child to the next, trying to decide which one to follow. Mike finally chooses the blond boy who is just starting to disappear into the woods. Mike takes off at a full sprint. Pine branches thwack at Mike's face as he strains to keep the boy in his sights. He can see flashes of blonde hair through the branches. If he could just stay with the boy until they're out of the trees. Thump! Mike's foot hits a rock. He loses his balance and pitches forward, his body flying toward the ground. Mike opened his eyes and discovered he was pitching forward out of his chair. His body flew toward the floor. His head cracked against the hard linoleum. Moaning, Mike put a hand onto his forehead. He winced when his fingers pressed against a lump near his temple. Ow. Mike pulled his hand back from the tender area. He pushed off the floor and managed to get to his knees. Just as he started to get his bearings, a shriekly beep started stabbing at the pain in his head. Mike scrambled to his feet and clumsily poked at his watch, managing to shut off the alarm. He looked at the digital numbers. It was 6 a.m. Dropping back into the office chair, Mike slowly leaned forward and rewind on his cassette. He picked up his paperback book and flooded its pages absently. What had happened to his dream? Who were those kids? Mike rubbed the sleep from his eyes. He flinched when he once again encountered the bump on his forehead. Mike dropped his hands and looked around the office. It was as he'd left it before he'd gone to sleep. But something about it. Mike had never had a dream like that before. It couldn't be a coincidence that it happened when he was in this room. He thought about the dream, the kids, the top hat, the bib, the bunny ears, the hook. Had he just so weirded himself out that his fears had penetrated his dream, or was something more going on? Mike's stomach was contracted with fear and confusion, but it also fluttered. It fluttered with excitement. Was he on the verge of a breakthrough? Hello, Toy Bonnie. How you doing tonight? Amazing reading on it. Thank you. I appreciate that. The rising sun's beams followed Mike through the door as he stepped into his house. The beams stretched out ahead of Mike and landed on Max, who was prone on her stomach on the sofa. The TV was, predictably, on QVC. Mike, his body feeling like it was buzzing, dropped his backpack in a white bakery bag on the kitchen table. He'd been so spun up by what had happened in his dream that he'd splurged and gotten donuts from the bakery at the grocery store. Chocolate iced. Their sweet scent now combined with a lingering smell of microwaved egg rolls. Mike didn't like egg rolls, but the fried smell was far better than any smells he'd encountered in the pizzeria. The pizzeria, Mike had thought the job there was going to be nothing but a pain in the butt. Who knew it would have such an effect on his dreams? Mike hadn't felt so buoyed and, well, he wasn't sure he'd ever felt this way, at least not in 13 years. Max let out a soft snore. Mike stepped over to the TV and turned it off. Then he touched Max's shoulder, barely, just a brush against the dark purple fabric of her blouse. She raised her head with a snort, wiped drool from her mouth, and yawned. When she spotted Mike, she quickly sat up and finger combed her long hair. Then she wiped sleep from her eyes. Max's cheeks looked flushed. He hoped she wasn't coming down with something. She was the best. Make that the most affordable sitter he'd found for Abby. How'd it go? Max asked. Mike thought again about his dream. He lifted one shoulder. It was interesting. Not the best job in the world, but I need it. Like a reference. For the judge who might try and take. He waved a hand. Never mind. Max nodded, then quickly looked away from Mike. Weird. He had never seen her act so skittish. You want a donut? Mike asked. No thanks. Max's response was flat. Weird again. Max wasn't exactly Miss Bubbly, but she was usually good for some sarcasm or sass, and she always looked him right in the eye. Why was she avoiding his gaze? Mike frowned. I do intend to pay you, you know. At some point. He picked up the donut bag. You sure you don't want a donut? Advance against your pay. He tried to grin. Max shook her head. She didn't smile. It's okay, she said. I know where you live. Mike chuckled. Max didn't. Max gathered up her stuff. Mike thought her posture was off, a little hunched. Maybe she was sick. You feel okay? Mike asked. Max startled. Her flush deepened. Huh? Yeah, sure, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Something was off. Mike thought about pushing to see what was up, but he had his own stuff to think about. See you tonight? Mike asked. Mike gave a half nod. Max gave him a half nod. She looked at Mike and started to open her mouth, then she closed it. For several long seconds, Mike and Max looked at each other. Out of the blue, and for the first time, Mike thought, Max is a pretty girl. Mike had always had too much going on to think about Max as pretty. She was just his babysitter. And now she looked like a babysitter who had something she wanted to say. Was she going to quit? Mike held his breath and waited. Finally, Max spoke. She's a really good kid, you know, she said. Huh? That was not what Mike had expected. At all. What did Max mean by that? Mike didn't get a chance to ask. Max was already out the door. Abby's room was bright with the early morning sunlight. She could feel it warming her closed eyelids, but she wasn't ready to open her eyes yet. Abby hugged Dolph close and burrowed deeper into the covers. She wanted to spend just a few more minutes with her friends. Abby could be with her friends when her eyes were open too, but sometimes it was easier to hang out with them when she was sleeping, or when she was just going into or coming out of sleep. Abby heard Mike open her door and walk over to her bed. Not ready to talk to her brother, Abby pretended she was asleep. Abby listened to Mike walk to her bed. She concentrated on keeping her breathing slow and even. The mattress dipped as Mike lowered himself to the edge of her bed. What was he doing? Abby couldn't remember the last time Mike had sat at the edge of her bed while she was sleeping, or pretending to sleep. Tempted to open her eyes and find out what was going on, Abby decided to wait it out. She kept breathing slowly. When Mike reached out and brushed a lock of Abby's hair from her cheek, she was sure she jerked a little. But maybe she didn't, because Mike didn't seem to notice. He smoothed her hair and stayed where he was. Okay, that was enough. This was too weird. Abby opened her eyes. Hey, Abs, Mike said. Hey. Abby looked at her brother. Something was different about him. He didn't look as tense as usual. He almost looked happy? No, not quite, but something. Mike stood. I need to grab a shower. Then we have to get you to school. Abby nodded. Mike ruffled Abby's hair. That was strange, too. He gave her a quick grin and left her room. Now, you understand. Now, here's the reason why he's acting like this, because of what's going on with him and his Aunt Jane. Thank you, much too. And also, how you doing tonight? But like I was saying, the reason why he's acting like this is because of what's going on with him and his Aunt Jane. She is basically, for those of you that weren't here for part 2, if you want to read it, watch that part, just mute real quick and I'll explain it. But if you don't really care, then just keep the sound on. And I'll give a thumbs up when I'm done saying my story, with getting everybody caught up for context. So go ahead and mute real quick. For those of you that haven't muted, pretty much in the last part, Jane and Mike had a meeting with Abby's psychiatrist, and his aunt pretty much played made a power game, pretty much, because the thing about the American judicial system, chances are, in a case like what's going on with this, Usually it's the woman that gets the child more than the man. Regardless of regardless of who's really telling the truth and who isn't. It's always the woman gets the child more often than the man. But the man can also get the child, or if we've watched those courts of child support cases where sometimes the woman has to pay more because she's making more than the man. Yeah. So pretty much that's what's going on, and he's still not sure what he wants to do. Does he want to keep Abby or what? Because he's got a lot to think about. Because he's not sure what's going to happen here. So yeah, that's pretty much what it boils down to. Is he's still remembering what Jane said to him the other day? Oh yeah. Uh, okay, that's it. If you muted, there's your thumbs up. But yeah, getting back to the story. Slouched in the corner of a cracked gray vinyl booth that smelled like lemon cleaner, Maxine put her shoulder against the adjacent window. The window glass felt cool through the mud-brown top she'd put on just for this morning at Sparky's Diner. The top felt appropriate. It looked dirty, and this meeting made Maxine feel dirty. Usually, Maxine loved the aromas of a diner. That distinctive mix of bacon and eggs and waffles and pancakes, breakfast foods and burgers and fries, lunch fare. She was probably one of the few people in the world who loved the smell of fry oil. Today, however, the food smells were making her feel queasy. Or no, it was why she was here that was making her feel queasy. Ignoring the conversational buzz and glasses and dishes, clinks, and other clatter around her, Maxine stared out the window and watched a swelling black cloud rush toward the sad, faded, or octagonal building. The cloud's shape was eerily skull-like, complete with what looked like vacant eye holes in a hungry maw. The cloud had already consumed the bright sun that had dominated the morning, and now it looked like it wanted to gobble up the old run-down greasy spoon. A sharp elbow jabbed into Maxine's rib. She turned and frowned at her brother. Space, she said. She didn't have to say more. Jeff understood her shorthand. He scooted a few inches away from her. Even though Jeff was 10 years older, the two of them were close. When Maxine was little, both of their parents had worked 2 jobs. Jeff had been more than a brother to Maxine. He'd been something closer to a surrogate dad, even if he was a screw-up at it. At 10, Jeff hadn't known squat about taking care of a baby. In the weeks after Maxine's mom's maternity leave had ended, Jeff had done his best. Even so, he'd lost his sister more than once, nearly drowned her, dropped her, scolded her, and fed her more candy than nutritious food. It was a wonder Maxine had survived. Sorry, Jeff said in a tone that made it clear he wasn't. He picked up a paper-covered straw and tore off the end of the wrapper. Pulling the paper back just a half inch, he put the straw to his lips and blew, shooting the paper wrapper at Maxine's face. It hit her in the nose. Maxine sighed and glared at Jeff. Age? Jeff snorted out a laugh. He elbowed Maxine again, this time on purpose. Maxine sighed once more and shook her head. Movement from the other side of the table caught her attention. She looked around across the scarred pine wood at the table at the lump sitting on the opposite side of the booth. This man's name was Doug. Just Doug, he'd said when he'd introduced himself. Doug was supposedly a lawyer. What kind of lawyer only went by his first name? A scuzz lawyer, that's what kind. She noticed Doug was staring at her breast as he slurped at a cup of coffee, to which she'd watched him add 4 creams and 6 packs of sugar just a few minutes before. She immediately lowered her gaze and crossed her arms over her chest. Total sleazeball, Maxine thought. What was she doing here? Maxine glanced at Jeff. He was sucking his soda noisily. She could feel his lead. his knee bouncing under the table. She knew he felt as awkward as she did, but probably for different reasons. Maxine loved her brother, and she thought he had a lot going for him. Having gotten more of their mother's looks than her father's, Jeb's hair was sandy brown, and his features were small and balanced. His features, however, didn't fit his size. At a good-sized 6'2", Jeb's body was too large for his small face. Even so, Maxine thought he was cute. He was kind too. He had a big heart. Jeff, however, was the king of bad choices. He'd already done time twice for relatively minor stuff. Car theft, breaking and entering. He couldn't seem to hold on to a job. She really shouldn't have talk him let him talk her into this. Or anything for that matter. Maxine already felt terrible about what she'd done. She didn't want to do anything worse. No, she shouldn't be here. Outside, rain started tapping on the windows. Maxine nudged Jeff. Move, she said. She needed to get out here. Before Jeff could even twitch, a clamorous crash cut through the normal diner hubbub. Maxine's head jerked to her left as she instinctively sought the source of the sound. Jeff and Doug looked in the direction too. Doug had to swivel his thick neck to look over his shoulder. Sparkly's eating area was arranged in a C shape around the kitchen, which took up about a third of the building's octagon. A squared-off counter cradled the cook's domain, from which came a constant din of sizzling, banging, and shouting. The boots lined the outer wall of the building. The door was at the bottom leg of the C. The racket that had canceled out everything else in the diner was an explosion of broken dishes that apparently had fallen from a busboy's very full tray. The boy, actually a sad-looking 30-something guy going prematurely bald, was mumbling something Maxine couldn't hear as he dropped to his knees to clean up the mess. Standing over him was a petite woman with an ash blonde, no doubt from a bottle, pixie cut. Jane, Mike's aunt. Probably in defiance of the storm kicking up outside the diner, Jane wore a pale pink pantsuit with matching high heels. She looked prim and proper, but Maxine knew she wasn't. Hands on hips, Jane deliberately stomped on the broken glass beneath her feet. She narrowly avoided the busboy's fingers. Max had a feeling the miss was an accident. No, you watch where you're going, Jane screeched. She took the shot of broken glass at the busboy's shoe. The busboy glared at Jane as she flounced away from him. June headed directly toward the booth Maxine really didn't want to be in. She couldn't escape, though. Now that Jane was here, it was too late. Nearly everyone in the place had frozen when they'd heard the dish explosion, and now most of the diners were returning to their food. Many pairs of eyes tracked Jane's progress, though. Her diva-like dramatics were designed to put her in the limelight. She made a point to huff theatrically as she moved on. Her high heels made emphatic little tapping sounds on the diner's stucked burgundy linoleum. Yeah, if you hadn't noticed, she's a fucking Karen. She's a she's an asshole. Jane reached their booth and she slid in next to Doug. But she didn't have enough space. She saw Doug a look, and he appeared to attempt to let some air out of the balloon of his body. He squished himself against the window. Before anyone says anything, Jane said as she settled herself, I have somewhere I have to be, so let's make this quick. Well, ma'am, if you have somewhere to go, maybe you should have gone there first and then came to the diner. You ever thought of that? Huh. Anyway, a tall, lanky, auburn-haired teen wearing a Sparky's uniform shirt and a white half-apron tied around his waist. Maxie knew his name was Ness. He was Sparky's son. Approached the table. Hey there, Ness said. Welcome to Sparky's. Ness lifted a hand toward Maxine and gave her a little smile. She returned the smile. "Can I start you folks off with some appetites?" "We are not eating," Jane said. "Well, that's no fun," Ness said. He leaned toward Jane and gave her a wink. "You know what they say. Lunch is the most important meal of the day." I thought that was breakfast," Jeff said. He frowned as if thinking hard on the subject. Maxine mentally shook her head. Her brother was a sweetie, but he wasn't all that bright. "Some people say that," Ness said. "But it's just a theory," he grinned. If you guys watched the movie before reading the book like I have, you'll know exactly where that's going. Yep. If you don't know the reference, in the movie, the character that's named Ness the character Ness was played by Matt Pat, who was very well known for his game theory videos, and he always ends every video the same way. "It's just a theory, a game theory. Thanks for watching." Doing all that. Man, that's gonna make me realize the fact that he's retired. He's retired. He retired either earlier this year or last year. Man, it's gonna be weird not seeing him on that. It's just gonna be weird not seeing him that much anymore. Interestingly enough, the very first video of his channel that I ever seen was actually his Linked is Not Dead, the Linked is Dead theory that he did for Majora's Mask. It's very well debunked now, but I still consider that video a bit nostalgic for me because that was the first video of his that I ever watched. Was that video? Yeah. Anyway. Jane narrowed her eyes and looked at Ness like he was like a gnat. "Are you getting paid by the word?" Jane asked. "Or can we have a minute?" Ness's grin drooped. So did the rest of his face. He shrugged and walked away from the booth. Jane curled her lip at Ness's retreating back. Her lips were painted in a color that matched her pantsuit. It wasn't a good look. Jane shifted her attention to her booth of companions. "Now, where were we?" she asked. No one answered her. Jane screwed Maxie with her best Cruella de Vil look. "Oh, right," Jane said. "You're about to tell me what a miserable failure you are." Before Maxine could open her mouth to tell Jane just what to do with herself, I think you know where she's going with that. Jeff leaned over the table. He jabbed a finger in Jane's direction. "Hey, screw you, lady," Jeff said. Maxine felt a surge of love for her brother. He was sweet and kind, but he always turned into a bulldog when anyone tried to mess with Maxine. "My sister went over every inch of that dump 100 times," Jeff said. "If there was something to find, she would have found it." He slapped a hand on the table. "Now pay up!" Jane raised an eyebrow at Jeff. "I'm sorry." "You said 200, Jeff said. Maxine, feeling unusually meek, probably because of the guilt that had been strangling her ever since she had agreed to do what Jane wanted done, spoke up softly. "Don't mind that noise, that's because things falling over." She wanted done, spoke up softly. "We had a deal," told Jane. Jane tilted her head to one side and slid her gaze up and down Maxine's torso. Maxine had to keep herself from looking down to be sure she didn't have a stain or something. "Yes," Jane said finally. "The deal was that you'd find me hard proof of criminal endangerment. Something actionable. Instead, all I've heard from you is about what a nice kid my niece is and how my nephew sleeps a lot." Oh, so this is what this punk ass woman is doing. She's pulling some bullshit, is what she's doing. She is trying to get this kid. She's trying to fuck this man's life up by doing whatever she could. You know what she could have done, honestly? And I'm not saying this as a joke, by the way, because it has happened before. She easily could have hired some random police officer to fucking fake evidence in this sort of case to make it look like he did it. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. There have been cops out there that have done this, where they will intentionally get a person incriminated just for the sake of being an asshole. Let's be honest. That's why I say what I said. She easily could have faked something instead of having to hire two people to do that. But but at the same time, yeah, if it came out that that cop was helping someone trying to incriminate somebody else, that cop probably would be in jail alongside her, as well as losing his job. But you know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's a true. But that is a true statement. There are some cops out there that will try to fake evidence to incriminate somebody, even when they've literally done nothing wrong, and it's just because of some random bullshit that the cop has against the person for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Anyway, he really does, though, Maxine said. Jane banged a fist on the table. Wait, hold on, let's do it better. No, wait, let me do it with my left hand. There you go. That hurt. Jeff's soda glass jittered and Dunk's coffee sloshed. His discarded little creamer cups and sugar packets hopped across the table like startled frogs. Sleeping is not a crime! Jane shouted. Heads at the diner's counter and a nearby booth swiveled to stare at Jane. She clearly didn't notice. Or care. Jeff ignored Jane. His gaze was on Dunn. Maxine looked at the lawyer. He was red in the face, and his eyes looked like they were trying to explode out of his head. Hey, dude, Jeff said to Dunn. You okay? Dunn moved his mouth around as if he was trying to work up spit. I just realized, Dunn said. He worked his mouth again, then cleared his throat. I probably shouldn't be hearing any of this. I probably shouldn't even be here at all. He looked around wildly, as if seeking rescue. He began scooting toward Jane, as if he could hip Scooter out of the booth and flee. Jane raised a hand toward Dunn. Stay! She commanded. Dunn stayed. Maxine felt like he should get a treat or something. Yeah, you know, the lawyer is absolutely right. He really should not be listening to any of this. He really shouldn't be, because this is criminal activity they're talking about. So he's right. But Jane, for whatever reason... why did Jane even bring him along to begin with? What? That's the big question I got in my head right now. Why is she bringing her lawyer here when she knows she's going to be talking about criminal activity? That shit don't make any sense. Could you imagine? I mean, think about it. You easily, like, any of the people that are there at the diner at this point in time, any one of them could be a lawyer overhearing this bullshit, being like, should we call the cops on this woman and have her arrested for like trying to get someone in trouble, trying to get someone in unlawful trouble because she's a bitch? She's being a Karen, but god damn, she really acted like an asshole. She is literally right. She is like, let me put it to you this way. I am not liking Jane to the point to where she is currently the second most hated character I've ever had to read about doing things or saying things or whatever. Who's number one on the list? I'll give you a hint. She's a character in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Oh my god. The movie, the actress that played her character so well that it's not even. She deserves a fucking Oscar for that. She deserves an Oscar for that performance. But if you thought she was bad in the movie, oh, she is worse in the book. Trust me, I've read the book before. I've read it from beginning to end. For as long a book as it is, I've read that book from beginning to end, and oh my god, I was so happy to be done with her. Then when she returned in Deathly Hollows, I was like, this bitch again? I was like, oh no, not this bitch again. God damn it, I hate this one. I hated her with a passion. She was such an asshole. She is the ultimate. She is probably in the Harry Potter world. She is the ultimate Karen. I swear to God. I hate Dolores. I to this day I have never met a character I've hated more than Dolores Umbridge ever. Oh my God, she is such an asshole. God damn it. She is like the brain dead person who acts like they will listen to the other side of the story, but because she thinks she knows everything, she will still side with the other side of the coin because she thinks she knows everything. She favors the rich and powerful over anybody else. So whenever the rich and powerful go off on Harry for what happened with him and Dudley in the beginning scene, she still sides with the rich and powerful, even though it was very clear Harry had no choice but to do what he did. Otherwise, it could have killed him and even Dudley. And then, of course, Dudley, being the little asshole that he is, threw Harry under the bus, but that's beside the point. Yeah, and then she goes to Hogwarts, and she just makes a mess of everything there. Oh my god. Yeah, in case you haven't noticed, I'm going to be reading that book as well as the other Harry Potter books in the series, as well as the spin-offs as well. Even though I, for the life of me, do not currently care about J.K. Rowling, nothing is going to stop me from reading the Harry Potter books, alright? Nothing. Not even a hatred for not even not liking the author is going to stop me from reading those books, because they're my childhood. That's also part of the reason why I'd want to read them, because they're part of my childhood. As well as the movies, but that's beside the point. Anyway. Jane looked from Maxine to Jeff. No one spoke. Maxine just wanted the whole thing to be over. She didn't even care if she got the money Jane had promised. She never should have agreed to search for dirt on Mike. Sure, Maxine needed the cash. She always needed cash. And yes, she was annoyed with Mike because he never bothered to look at her. Really look at her. But, well, I guess we're done here, Jane said. Unless either of you have any other bright ideas. Which I do think is unlikely. Jeff piped up. Why don't we just kill him? Maxine shot her brother a look. Was he serious? She couldn't tell. Jeff was kind, yes, but he had a comic book view of life. There were his people and everyone else. Mike was part of everyone else. In Jeff's view, Mike might have been disposable. So, in that case, he's looking more at it like a villain than a hero. Okay. Doug tried to shove Jane out of his way with his big soft shoulder. He half attempted to stand in the booth. Jane immediately grabbed his tie, yanked him down, and used the flat of her hand to shove him back into place. He didn't resist her. He retreated toward the window. Jane looked at Jeff with an expression somewhat similar to approval. Tempting, Jane said, But no. Not thinking before opening her mouth, Maxine whispered, his job. Jane. Oh no, she shouldn't have said that. Jane turned toward Maxine and leaned forward. Speak up, honey. The honey was triple wrapped in sarcasm. Hating herself but apparently unable to stop herself, Maxine raised her voice and continued. Well, Mike was saying how he really needs his new job. You know, so he can look good on paper. Like for the judge? Jane snorted. My nephew, the altruist. That's all very fascinating, dear. But I'm not hearing a plan. Maxine glanced at Jeff. He returned her gaze, and he grinned. He looked back toward Jane. We tossed the place, Jeff said. Jane raised her eyebrows, clearly surprised that Jeff had said something semi-interesting. Go on, she said. Jeff shoved aside his soda glass and put both hands palms down on the table. Mike's a security guard, right? His job is to make sure no one gets in. So, he looked from Jane to Maxine and back to Jane. We get in. Mess the place up good. Help ourselves to whatever we find along the way. Jeff lifted a finger and pointed at Jane. Your nephew gets canned. Judge gives you the kid. He hesitated, then leaned back and crossed his arms. And you give us $2,000. You know what? While I don't approve of his plan, he is playing her really good. That is smart thinking. Minus the part where he's, like I said, minus the part where he's destroying shit. That he is playing her real good. Jane put up in her chin and gave Jeff an as if look. It's 200, she said. Jeff shook his head. 200 was for going through his underwear drawer. We're talking about breaking and entering, destroying private property, theft. That's like 5 years minimum. Probably more like 10, Doug inserted. Jane shot down the desk glare. Then she tapped pin pen and nails on the boot's tabletop. The skin at the outer edges of her eyes pulled in. 1,000, Jane said. Jeff looked at Maxine. She leaned away from him, attempting to fuse with the window, or perhaps pass right through it. She couldn't believe she was having anything to do with any of this. Still, she gave Jeff a minuscule nod. Jeff looked at Jane. Okay, he said. Jane stood, adjusting the hem of her pantsuit jacket. She bent forward across the boot's table. She leaned in close, just inches from Jeff's face. Maxine got a whiff of Jane's perfume. It was sharp and cutting, like it was a fusion of pepper and grapefruit. In low, menacing tones, Jane spoke. Do it soon. And don't mess it up. Jane twisted her lips. I mean, do mess it up. She pointed at the table. But don't just mess this up. Jane stalked off. Doug hefted himself out the booth bench. Maxine watched Doug trail in Jane's wake. Maxine looked at her brother. Clearly confused, Jeff was looking at the spot on the table that Jane had pointed to. Maxine, fed up with everything, slapped Jeff's finger. He frowned at her, still baffled. She gave him her best moron look and sighed. Does somebody want to tell me what the hell what Jane's doing here is, besides the fact that it's illegal? She is literally trying to set up her nephew to, this man to fail, because she really wants so badly to get this little girl she wants to have them. Mike pretty much explained it. The only reason why Jane wants Abby is because of the money. because quite frankly, um, hmm, I just realized something. Let me take a look at something real quick. Hold on a second. I swear to God, if this one character has the same name from the book I just read not too long ago, I'm gonna be very surprised. Trying to move a lot of shit to fit what I'm trying to fit here. Hold on. Hmm. Okay, no, it wasn't. Alright. Okay. I just had to see that for myself. Okay, so it wasn't the same character with the same name. I just had to see that for a moment real quick. I'm also gonna go ahead and take a little breather. Not ending the stream right now. But I am going to take a little break and get something real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back now. I just got me some tea. Even though I don't really like the kind of tea we got right now because because this kind of tea tastes more like a bit like water than how it usually is. For me because we didn't have much sugar to work with and yeah, it's not very good. I don't like it. Not really. But it is what it is. Um, hmm. Let's see something here. Hmm. Here's what I'll do here. Hmm. Trying to find where it happens, where it starts at least. Alright, so I'm gonna read chapters 9 and 10 and then call it a night. So that way, I can get a bit of sleep because it's already 5 a.m. And I do have something that I'm taking part in at 4:30, so we'll see what happens. Hello, Chris. How you doing tonight? So what I'll do is I'll probably read chapters 9 and 10, and then read chapters 11 through 14 later tonight. Whether it be before this thing that I'm doing, that I'm taking part in later today, happens, or immediately after that. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, let's just go ahead and just read chapters 9 and 10, and that will be the end of the stream. Even though I know I said I was going to read through 9 through 13, I'll just read 9, 11 through 14 just to make up for that. Because I know 14, because 11 is where what we just heard the plan about happening is going to happen and how it goes down. And chapter 14 is when it ends. So, yeah. Well, partway through chapter 14, I should say. But I'll be reading the whole chapter just for the sake of, keeping up with the book. Keeping up with the chapters. You know what I mean? But after I read those two chapter books, I do have some things I do have some things to say as well. A bit of a announcement in regard to what I got planned for October, in case you guys have not seen the community post, or if you're not really the type to read community posts, I will make the announcement here after this. So yeah, let's get started. Also, good to hear that you're doing good, Chris. Good to hear. Chapter 9. Thunder rattled Mike's bedroom walls. He heard heavy raindrops rat-a-tat at the window pane behind his blackout curtains. The brilliant sunlight that had ushered in the day had thrown in the towel when heavy storm clouds had descended on the town just before lunch. Since then, the day had been dark and dreary. Mike's mood had similarly changed. The surge of optimism Mike had felt at the start of the day had diminished as the day had gone on. He wanted it back, and he had a plan to reclaim it. Planting his feet wide on his bouncy mattress, one foot close to the edge, Mike reached up to try to untape his Nebraska poster from the ceiling over his bed. He managed to slide his fingers under one edge of the thick paper. "What are you doing?" Abby's voice came right on the heels of another clap of thunder. The combination of the boom and her unexpected appearance startled Mike. He jerked, and his foot slipped off the edge of the bed. Mike went tumbling. His fingers caught a big chunk of the poster, and he took the chunk with him to the floor. Having managed to land head and shoulders first, Mike shifted to his rump and rubbed his head. He looked toward his doorway. Abby stood just a foot inside Mike's room. Dressed in her usual overalls, today's were bright blues, she wore Mike's Freddy Fazbear security vest. Even though Mike was annoyed by the interruption in his torn poster, he had to admit that Abby looked pretty adorable in the vest, like she was playing dress-up, something he'd never seen her do before. Mike massaged his throbbing shoulder. "Did you want something?" he asked Abby. Abby looked up at the ceiling, and Mike's gaze followed hers. The part of the poster he hadn't just ripped free dangled down toward the bed. The remaining bit read, "Pining for fun?" Mike sighed. He pointed at Abby. "All right, come on. Take that off. I need to get to work." Abby nodded. I know. I'm coming with you. Mike grunted and stood. He pressed a hand to his temple. Another headache was coming on. It hadn't just been his collision with the floor. His mood had been spiraling downward all day. And now, even though he had a plan to retrieve the hope he'd felt earlier, he dreaded having to go back to the spooky restaurant. He wasn't up from Abby's games. Abby, please, Mike said. He held out a hand. Just give me the vest. Abby didn't move, so Mike walked over to her and reached for the vest. Abby stepped back. No! Abby shouted. Mike really wanted to scream at her. He hated when she got like this. Summoning what little patience he had available to him, which wasn't much, Mike nodded in front of Abby. He took a second to make sure that when he spoke, he wouldn't explode. Then he said, in what he hoped was a calm but firm tone, Give me the vest now. Abby made a face, then she mimicked him. I'm coming with you. Mike heard the front door bang open. Even from down the hall, the sound of Max's footsteps was clear. The tap-tap was joined by a fluttery noise. Given the thrumming of the rain on the roof overhead, Mike guessed that Max was shaking out her umbrella. Hello? Max called out. Abby turned toward the hallway. Mike lunged for her. When Maxine heard Abby shriek, she rushed toward the hallway. Looking down the length of the narrow empty space, Maxine started forward. Was Abby really in trouble, or was she having one of her... Abby screamed again. As she did, Mike, holding a wildly flaming Abby in his arms, stepped into view. So that question was answered. Maxine wiped rain off her face. The umbrella hadn't been much help in the windy storm, as she watched Mike carry his sister to her room. Mike set Abby down, and as she spun away from him, he grabbed the vest she was wearing and pulled it off. He quickly slammed Abby's door and locked it. Abby continued to hit her wall from within her bedroom. Most of her noise was just general wailing, but mixed in were some impressive beyond her age swear words and a few stated opinions of her brother. Maxine agreed with a few of them. Panting, Mike looked down the hall and met Maxine's gaze. Hey, Max, he said. She lifted a hand, signaling for him to stop. Mike pointed at Abby's closed door. He acted like he couldn't hear any of the insults, and yowling reaching through the flimsy wood barrier. She's all yours, Mike said. Max raised an eyebrow and quirked her lips. Great. Yeah, if there's one thing a babysitter does not like to deal with, it's children who are acting like that before the parents go to work or whatever they got planned for the night. Yeah, not good. Yeah, not good at all. When Mike got to work, he didn't waste his time freaking himself out by looking around the pizzeria. The lobby and hallway looked the same as they had the day before. He assumed everything else was status quo too, and if it wasn't, he didn't want to know about it. As soon as Mike entered the office and closed and locked the door behind him, he didn't bother with moving the filing cabinet because he felt silly for doing it the night before. He shed his wet jacket and took his backpack to the desk. Then he made his preparations. Setup didn't take long. Within 10 minutes, Mike was planting himself in the office desk chair. Once there, Mike swept his gaze over all the monitors. All the power was on as it could get, and he had a clear view of everything on the monitors, inside and out. A thunder cracked us onto the pizzeria. The building groaned as if in protest. Mike's attention landed on the main exterior camera. He watched a river of rainwater flow out from the parking lot into the street. Satisfied that all was well with the pizzeria, Mike took his pill, turned on his cassette, and touched his paperback as if it was a talisman. Then he leaned forward and looked at the Nebraska poster, which he had managed to repair, shoddily, and taped to the wall opposite the desk. Mike turned up the volume on the cassette player so it could trump the sound of the thunderstorm. Chirping birds, rustling tree branches, and gurgling stream. Mike softened his gaze and allowed the pine trees, bisected diagonally by his ineptly repaired tear, to sway. As the pine needles shimmied, Mike's eyes lost their focus. His lids flustered. Then they dropped. The tear marring the pine trees was gone. They moved seamlessly into the wind, one flowing wave of gauzy green. Mike relaxed into the soothing sounds of the breeze, but he stiffened when when thunder muscled its way into the breeze's swishing rhythm. The sun filtering through the trees began to flicker. It wasn't the lights in the office. Part of Mike's consciousness was still aware of where he was in his waking state, but it was hanging on tenuously. Mike, determined to fall into the reality of the pine forest, blurred all the sounds he was hearing. He wove the thunder into creaking tree branches, and when he heard a crackling hiss and pop, he braided that sticky sound into the crackle of the bristling pine needles. The sun, for 1 second, bathed Mike's face in warmth and then disappeared again, letting cool sage slip over him. In and out. The light blinked. The confusion of sounds continued, and Mike frowned. Let me get a drink of tea real quick. Hold on. Hello, Izumi. Thank you for the great job, and FNAF, keep reading. I just wanted to take a quick drink. I'm getting back to reading now, but I wanted to take a quick drink real quick before I continued reading. Getting back to said book. What was that lower sound? Off in the distance. Hello, Kissy2905. How you doing tonight? What was that lower sound? Off in the distance. Was that music? Mike's awareness succumbed to the fog of sleep. He found himself in a series of quick-take impressions. An orange toy plane flies through the air. Ketchup spurts. Tires spin on gravel. Mike runs. Shoving aside branches that slap on his face, Mike pounds through the forest. His movements are familiar, practiced, but something strange about them. Bursting out of the trees, Mike looks down the road just in time to see the black car disappear. Why does the black car look different? Childish laughter bubbles behind Mike. He turns. As Mike rotates around, his gaze drops. He jerks in surprise. Best stream I've watched so far. Well, thank you, Izumi. I appreciate that. Now, I will admit there were a few times I had to reread words because I was messing up on reading them. But outside of that, I'm doing pretty good with reading. As Mike rotates around, his gaze drops. He jerks in surprise as he realizes he's looking down at his adult body. This is different. But the children aren't. Mike looks at the 5 children. They're just as they were the last time that he saw them. Mike watches the children, but he doesn't approach them. They watch him in return. Excuse me. What now? Understanding clearly that he's in his dream, but that it was divergent from its norm, Mike hesitates. Then he speaks. Please, Mike says to the children. Don't run. I just want to know what you saw. The blond boy narrows his cold blue eyes at Mike. His upper lip lifts into a semi-sneer. The blond boy... I'm actually reading one page ahead. Same? Thank you, Kissy. I appreciate that. I'm begging you, Mike says. Who took my brother? The blond boy's expression doesn't change. The other children ignore Mike. Mike runs a hand through his hair, frustrated. Why won't the kids tell him anything? He takes a step forward. He raises his voice. Who took Garrett? Mike shouts spooks the children. They bolt. No! Mike yells. Facing the same situation that he was in before, Mike makes an instant decision this time. He chases the boy with a paper hook. Now that Mike is adult-sized, he can easily outrun the small child. The boy had reddish hair, and Mike keeps his gaze locked on that hair as he runs. Even racing over the forest's uneven ground, Mike quickly closes the distance. Almost upon the boy, Mike reaches for the kid's shoulder. The boy spins around. Suddenly, Mike sees a flash of silver. The paper hook is scything through the air. Something sharp stings at Mike's arm. He staggers back, stunned. Mike looks down at his arm. His shirt sleeve gapes open. The material is slashed apart. A narrow ribbon of red appears on Mike's skin. Shocked, Mike looks back at the red-haired boy. The boy, his freckled face has a pert little nose and soft cheeks, looks up at Mike with staggeringly fearsome green eyes. The boy opens his mouth and unleashes a distorted mechanical shriek. You know the one. We gotta play it just for the sake of why the not. Thank you, Kissy. I appreciate that. To put it this way, when I first just to give a little bit of a thing here, when I was younger, like elementary school, almost like first part of middle school, I wasn't really much into reading. I didn't really care for reading books. But then high school came around, and yeah, I started reading a lot more then. So yeah. Yep. So, just for the record, there's going to be a jump scare. That was funny. I forgot they do the preview sometimes on these videos. That scared the shit out of me. Oh my god, that was funny. That scared the shit. I wasn't even ready for that. But yes, I was gonna do that. I was gonna play this. I was about to do like a jump scare warning, and I just did that. I was literally gonna say there's a jump scare warning, and I forgot how these videos sometimes like to do the preview, and it startled me. That probably just woke me up right there. Anyway, but yeah, I was gonna play the sound anyway to make it fit with the scene. So yeah, here's what we're gonna do. All right. Hold on. Let me do it right. We're gonna. I want to read that paragraph again, and then we're gonna play the sound. All right. So be prepared. That's gonna be a moment of that's gonna be moment of the stream right there. I should make a short of that. I jump scare myself for absolutely no reason other than because of my own stupidity. Shocked. So I'm gonna read the paragraph again, and then I'm gonna play the sound. So there's your jump scare warning. So that way we're all prepared for it this time. Shocked, Mike looks back at the red-haired boy. The boy, whose freckled face has a pert little nose and soft cheeks, looks up at Mike with staggeringly fearsome green eyes. The boy opens his mouth and unleashes a distorted mechanical shriek. Mike recoils. He opened his eyes. Mike goggled at the overhead lights. They were flashing on and off with dizzying quickness. Looking away from the lights, Mike slapped his palms over his ears because the lights were only half of the assault on his senses. Screeching feedback was blaring from the intercom on the ceiling over the desk. Alright, prepared, gotta go. Alright, Kissy, thank you for stopping by. Hope you have a good rest of your day or night, whatever time of day you're on. Hopefully your day is a good one. Mike shifted his focus to the CCTV monitors. He gaped at them. The monitors had gone haywire. Some of the screens were pulsing random flashes of colored lights. Some were streaming indecipherable lines of binary code, which were entwined around twisted, distorted images. Abruptly, a frenetic 80s rock song blasted from the overhead speakers. Mike jolted at the sound, nearly falling from his chair. Throwing out an arm to steady himself, Mike knocked his pill bottle to the floor. The cap wasn't on tight. The little white pills scattered over the black and white linoleum. Mike's gaze shot from the pills up to the intercom. He grabbed his head with both hands. "Stop!" Mike yelled, even though he knew his steps were going to help. But he couldn't help himself. His senses were saturated. He was totally overwhelmed. Standing, Mike spun one way and then the other. What should he do? On the verge of totally losing it, Mike got help from his memory banks. His brain provided him an inner Raglan replay. "Fair warning," Raglan's voice said in Mike's head. "The power can be a bit screwy. If you'll have any issues, you'll find the system breaker in the main office. Just give it a flip." Mike stood. Starting to turn toward the circuit box, Mike did a double take. His gaze flitted toward the window in the office door. The frosted glass looked perfectly normal. Mike could see well enough through the glass to reassure himself that nothing was out there. But had it been? Mike could have sworn he'd just gotten a glimpse of one eye watching him through the glass. One eye and one eye patch. Could... Mike shook his head. No way. He'd imagined it. Probably because of his dream. The rock music crescendoed. The lights started going on and off even faster. That's enough. Giving the frosted window one more glance, nothing was there, Mike sprinted to the circuit breaker. He grabbed the lever and shoved it downward. Everything went black, and the building was filled with blessed silence. Even the thunder had stopped. The red emergency bulb above the circuit box clicked on. Mike leaned back against the wall and tried to get a grip on himself. His breath was coming in ragged gasps. His pulse was so fast that it felt like a Formula One race was being run in his veins. His ears were ringing from the reckless auditory assault. Mike stood in the near darkness for a few seconds. Then his skin prickled. The darkness was unfriendly, suffocating. Mike put his hand back on the lever. He shoved it upward. A comforting ka-chunk relit the office. Mike looked at the back of the fluorescent bulbs. They were dim, but they were steady. Stepping over to the desk, Mike looked at the monitors. They were back to normal. Mike exhaled loudly. His pulse began to steady itself and... An insistent buzzer revved up Mike's pulse again. The buzz came once, twice, 3 times. Mike leaned over and scanned the monitors. He frowned. Centered in front of this entrance camera, a uniformed police officer stood in a steady rain, finger on the building's doorbell. The thunder might have abated, but the storm was still dumping torrents of water on the pizzeria. Mike peered at the wavy CCTV feed. Between the poor resolution the rain and the officer's hooded poncho, Mike couldn't make out the officer's face. All he could see was pale fuzziness within the hood, even when the officer looked up at the camera and waved. Bracing himself for whatever was going to come next, Mike pulled open one of the pizzeria's heavy entrance doors. He peered out at the rain-parka-clad officer. Close up, in real life instead of on an old hazy CCTV screen, the police officer's face was clear and it belonged to a woman. The female officer smiled at Mike. "About time," she said in a pleasing, smooth voice. "I was starting to think you fell asleep on the job." Mike, still disoriented by the commotion in the office and puzzled by why a cop was at the pizzeria's door, blinked at the woman like an idiot. He couldn't seem to get his brain to engage properly. It didn't help that the unexpected cop at the door was a very pretty cop. Even though Mike couldn't see the woman's hair or body under the bulky rain gear, he could see enough of her big blue eyes, her high-flushed cheeks, and her wide, upturned mouth to find her looks unsettling. Mike, having had little time or inclination to date, often got flustered when he was around a pretty woman. A pretty cop was even more muddling, but he had to say something. Mike cleared his throat and managed. "Can I help you, officer?" "Please." Pulling off her rain parka, the cop brushed a few strands of stretched blonde hair from her pale face. The hair was shiny and appeared to be long, but was currently confined in some kind of twist. "My name's Vanessa," she said as she shook water from the parka. Water sprayed Mike's pants. He couldn't have cared less. Vanessa looked at Mike. "And you must be..." Now that Mike could see Vanessa's sleek hair and the slender but curvy finger in her snug, dark blue police uniform, he was even more tongue-tied. All he was capable of was more idiotic blinking. Vanessa smiled at Mike with what might have been a pity. Or maybe she was being friendly. "The new security guard," she concluded. She glanced down at Mike's arm. "You're bleeding, by the way." That surprised Mike so much that he said, "What?" Vanessa pointed. "Your arm." Mike looked down at his arm and his mouth dropped open. It fell open so hard and so wide that his jaw might have made it to the floor. Clearly remembering his dream, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The sleeve of Mike's black shirt was cut cleanly along the forearm. The sliced fabric was soaked in blood. "That looks nasty," Vanessa said. Mike suddenly felt woozy. Yeah," he said. He wavered on his feet. Not from blood loss or anything. The cut was long, but it didn't look that deep. He was more dazed than badly injured. While Mike made like the swaying pine tree, Vanessa took charge. She briskly stepped past Mike and started striding across the lobby. She moved as if she owned the place. "Come on," Vanessa flung back over her shoulder. "I know where there's a first aid kit." Mike's brows bunched. "She does?" How would a cop know where, um, how would a cop know exactly where a first aid kit would be at in a place like this? What, has she been there so many times that she knows the ins and outs of that place? Or is there something more to the story of this woman? I really do not like that tea. I may just dump out that gallon tea and make me a new thing of tea. Because that is just too watery for my taste. Ah. Chapter 10. "I love what you've done with the place," Vanessa said. Fumbling with a roll of gauze, Mike glanced over at her. She stood on the other side of the office, examining his his pieced together poster. Why Nebraska? She asked. When Mike didn't answer, Vanessa looked back at him. She watched him struggle to wrap the gauze around his injured arm. Need a hand with that? She asked. I'm fine, Mike said. Really? Mike looked down at the mess he was making with the gauze that Vanessa had pulled from a kit that had been stashed in the bottom drawer of one of the filing cabinets. He was pretty sure a 2-year-old could have done a better job at wrapping his wound. He sighed. Clearly this was not something he could do on his own. Flushing, Mike held out his arm toward Vanessa. She grinned and crossed to the desk. Perching on the edge of the desk near the VCR, she leaned over and removed the tangled mess Mike had made with the gauze. Vanessa, Mike discovered, smelled very good. Was it her perfume? Her shampoo or lotion? Whatever it was nice. A combination of something flowery, along with vanilla and apples. Vanessa began wrapping his arm efficiently. Her movements were quick and precise. Mike hoped she couldn't hear his heartbeat. It quickened when her cool, soft fingers brushed against his skin. While she worked, Vanessa started talking at a rapid-fire pace. I'm a certified EMT, you know. I did that first before I decided I'd rather be a cop. I don't do rescue runs anymore, but if your heart ever gives out, I'm the one you want to call. Assuming you can speak and hold a phone. Vanessa spoke so quickly that her words ran together. Mike had trouble keeping up. Her hands flew over his arm, too. She was acting almost manic. Nonplussed by pretty much everything about this unexpected cop, Mike was mostly perplexed by her familiarity with the pizzeria. So he said, You seem to know your way around. Vanessa's fingers jittered against the bandage, which was almost complete. She spoke quickly again. Freddy's on my beat. I like to stay well informed. She looked up and gazed around. I also loved this place when I was a kid. Vanessa tugged on the gauze, tightening it. Really tightening it. Mike grunted. That should do it, Vanessa said. She patted his upper arm. Then she pushed off the desk and stood. She extended a hand. Vanessa Shelley, she grinned. Might as well finish our meet, cute. Mike blinked at Vanessa. She laughed. Just kidding. But seriously. She shoved her hand forward forcefully. Let's see if we can do this. Vanessa Shelley, she repeated. Mike was a little reluctant to take her hand. She was such a powerhouse that he wouldn't have been surprised if he somehow lost his hand in the process of shaking hers. Mike took Vanessa's hand. She shook it twice, vigorously, as he said, Mike Schmidt. Pleasure to meet you, Mike, Vanessa said, squeezing his hand once before she let it go. She stepped back and looked up the intercom before returning her gaze to Mike's face. Unnervingly, speaking in a totally different tone of voice, Vanessa said, So are you doing all right this evening, Mike? Gone was the breakneck-like chatter. Her tone was measured and low. All cop. Mike fidgeted as Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She seemed to be studying him with suspicion. What the hell? Not sure how to respond to the out-of-the-blue, hard right turn, Mike could only say, What? Vanessa's eyes narrowed even more. A muscle at her strong jawline twitched. Are you all right? She repeated, more slowly, as if speaking to a person with an IQ of 10. As in, are you okay? Are you cool? Is everything copacetic? Huh. Mike crossed his arms, ignoring the pain in his left forearm. I know what all right means, he said. Vanessa's demeanor flipped again. She smiled brightly and began speaking quickly once more. Hey, that's great! Still talking fast, she dropped the smile as she continued. Did you also know that your eyes are bloodshot and your pupils are dilated and your heart rate is through the roof? All of this is aside from the gash on your arm, which, let's be honest, is pretty dang bizarre. And you've been acting shifty and suspicious since the moment you opened the door. Did you know that too? Mike stared at Vanessa, open mouthed. It's. Vanessa put her hands on her utility belt. The leather creaked. Yes, she said with mock tolerance. Mike sighed. What was the right way to go here? He couldn't tell her about his dream, obviously, but maybe he should be honest. To a point. It's been a really, really weird night, he said. Vanessa tapped her blunt, unpolished nails on her baton. She eyed Mike for a long, disconcerting moment. Then someone invisible flipped a switch. Vanessa's cop mode deactivated. She flashed a wide, warm smile at Mike and said airily, Sounds like Freddy's. Mike was now totally mystified. What did she mean by that? Mike's befuddlement must have shown on his face. Vanessa let out a short laugh and waved an arm to indicate the building around them. This place, it gets to people. Vanessa leaned toward Mike. That's why you're going to quit. The light tone was gone again. She was cop serious. Mike felt like he was being spun on a merry-go-round. What? Vanessa nodded twice. Her voice returned to cheerleader sprightly. Oh yeah, your security hires never last long here. It's like a fact. Mike had no idea what to make of that. The only thing he could think to say was, maybe I'm different. Vanessa studied Mike. Her eyes darkened and her face went still. She looked like she'd fallen down a deep, dark rabbit hole of introspection. Then the dark Vanessa clouds cleared. The sun came back to her face. She beamed at Mike. So have you met them yet? Met who? Them, Vanessa said. You know, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. Mike gaped at her. Vanessa smiled at his cluelessness. She turned toward the door, then looked back at Mike and motioned for him to follow her. Come on, she said. Gonna get a drink real quick. Give me a second. The dining room was dim, but its lights were on. Strangely, when Vanessa had used the light switch near the archway, it had worked. Even in better light, though, the dining room was still not one of Mike's favorite places. There was something haunting about the open space, the trash, the children's drawings, and the expansive crusty red stage curtain. Vanessa didn't seem to be bothered by any of the things that made Mike's skin crawl. She strode confidently and purposefully toward the stage. Mike trailed behind her, hidden back enough to soothe herself, but not far enough to look like a total coward. Attempting to distract himself from his nerves, Mike called to her. So what are the other reasons? Vanessa glanced over her shoulder. Huh? You said I'd quit my job because this place won't get to me, among other reasons, he reminded her. What reasons? Vanessa stopped. They'd reached the stage and she now stood in front of the main stage. Mike sidled away from it, ending up in front of the small purple curtain stage. Vanessa faced Mike. She put her hands on her hips. Something flashed in her eyes. Annoyance? Challenge? You tell me, she said. Is this where you see yourself in 10 years? How about in 20 years? Look down the line. What do you see? I mean, what do I know? Maybe the benefits are great. Pension? 401k? Mike felt like he got whiplash every time Vanessa spoke. Even though the pendulum pace of his interaction with her was giving him a headache, he laughed. Vanessa smiled. Didn't think so. She cocked her head. Add to that thing with those kids going missing. It felt like Vanessa had just kicked Mike in the solar plexus. He struggled to get his next breath. What did you just say? He asked. Vanessa acted like she hadn't heard the question. Walking away from Mike, she strode to the wall and stood in front of the red Showtime button. Prepare to have your mind blown, Vanessa said. Vanessa hit the big red button. The instant she did, it felt like a dozen things happened at once. The first thing to get Mike's attention was the swish of the purple curtains. They swung apart and Mike yelped and scuttled backward. The pirate fox animatronic was lurching forward out of the darkness. It was shot to the edge of the stage, just inches from where Mike had just been standing. At the same time, the main curtains reeled open. The entire room was suddenly lit up with psychedelic color. Floodlights came on, shooting blinding streaks of colored light toward the stage. Also, simultaneously, a rousing 80s rock song began thumping from the overhead speakers. Mike recognized it immediately. It was the same song he'd heard in the office when all hell was breaking loose. The deranged-looking fox that had nearly scared the pants off Mike started jerking around in a spasmodic dance. Mike was mesmerized by the convulsive motions. He especially couldn't take his eyes off the gleaming silver hook, which cut through the air over and over as the fox gyrated. When the fox looked down at Mike, or at least it seemed like the fox looked at him, Mike finally moved. He stepped over to join Vanessa, who now stood center on, at the base of the main stage. Mike looked up at the stage. And there they were, the rest of the characters Mike had seen in the posters. The yellow chick with the cupcake, the blue bunny with the electric guitar, the brown bear with the bow tie and top hat. Mike put all the names into the toothy smiled faces. Foxy, Chica, Bonnie, Freddy, rocking out. His gaze looked on the bopping and twirling animatronics. Mike couldn't decide whether to be entertained, repulsed, or sympathetic. The display was at once fascinating, disgusting, and sad. Maybe when they'd been in their heyday, bright and pristine in all their glory, the animatronics might have been fun to watch. Now, however, the fox fur-covered robotic animals were filthy and mottled. The fur, which was rotting, was riddled with holes, and through those holes, the metal endoskeletons beneath were rusting. Wires poked out of gaps in the fur, and the animatronics' mechanisms made chunky, glitchy, whirring noises. The Bonnie's electric guitar was faded, battered, and bent. This is, Mike tried. The best thing that you've ever seen in your life? Vanessa filled in. Mike shook his head. I was going to say deeply traumatic. Vanessa shook a look at Mike. Shot a look at Mike. He shrugged. Vanessa returned the shrug and then she held out a hand. Wanna dance? Mike stared at Vanessa's hand. Was she serious? He wasn't going to find out, because while he tried to work out the answer to her question, a burst of sparks exploded from Bonnie's guitar. At the same time, the music sputtered and screeched to a jarring stop. Red hot and bursting with bright color, sparks spewed from the stage. As a few of the sizzling bites of heat hit the black and white check dining room floor, the old floodlights went out. Then the swirling lights were gone. The curtains began to close. Agog, Mike couldn't take his eyes off the suddenly rigid animatronics. His gaze went from one to the other, landing finally on Freddy. The curtains were sweeping together in front of the bear. As they did, Freddy's gaze seemed to shift. It appeared as if the bear was staring directly at Mike. The curtains finished closing. Mike shivered. Surely the animatronics couldn't have been making direct eye contact with Mike. They weren't that sentient, were they? Maybe next time, Vanessa said. Mike pulled his gaze from the closed curtains. He looked at Vanessa. She was expressionless. He couldn't read her. Vanessa headed toward the archway. Mike started to follow her, but he felt compelled to check the closed curtains again. They remained shut, but they swayed back and forth ever so slightly. Now that all the bright lights were out, the curtains were engulfed in shadows. Mike felt goosebumps on his arms. He rubbed them, and the gesture brought back what Vanessa had said earlier. Hurrying after Vanessa, who was still heading toward the lobby, Mike called out, You said some kids were missing?" Vanessa stopped. She turned and looked at Mike. She cocked her head as if she found Mike interesting, or maybe dense. "Sure," she said. "Back in the 80s. What happened to them?" Mike asked. Vanessa crossed her arms. It was big news. She made a face that Mike couldn't interpret. "It's why the place shut down," she explained. Mike felt like the floor under his feet was falling away. "What?" Glancing at his face, Vanessa said, "Wow, you really didn't do your homework, did you?" She looked at him up and down as if in mock disapproval. Or maybe her disapproval was real. She shook her head. "Is this the movie novel?" "Yes, it is. The very movie novel, right here. Yep, very much the movie novel." So far, the only difference I've found from the novel into the movie is the moment where it says that Abby was saying some words that she shouldn't know at her age, and and sharing a few other opinions. I don't think that happened in the movie. I think that's the only difference between the movie and the novel I've seen that I've read thus far. But yes, this is the movie novel. Also, how are you doing, Mr. Unknown? How are you doing today and tonight? Or maybe her disapproval was real. She shook her head. "And you're not even wearing your badge." "Huh? Badge? What badge?" Mike was pretty sure Vanessa had seen his face arranged in expressions of totally vapid ignorance more than pretty much anything he'd ever met before. And that was saying a lot. Raising an eyebrow at him, she motioned for him to follow her as she veered away from the arch and headed to the far side of the dining area. Skirting around an overturned table and a pile of chairs, Vanessa led him into the arcade. Their footsteps made little purring and tinkling sounds as their feet scuffed over the dusty floor and kicked aside debris. The dry smell of dust mushroomed up around them. At the front edge of the arcade, a long, thick-lit dust glass counter enclosed a display of decrepit game prizes. Mounds of moldy, limp-faded plush animals lay pathetically next to clusters of cracked plastic toys and crusty Freddy's paraphernalia. Mike spotted hats and mugs and pendants and rings and figurines and posters. When they reached the counter, Vanessa went behind it and slid open a cabinet door with a tap and a whoosh. She reached into the conglomeration of wasted prizes. Mike cringed at her fingers, picked up dusty green spores, and tossed aside what looked like colorful dead baby animals. He wanted to tell her to stop what she was doing. It was too concerning. Before Mike could speak, Vanessa pulled her hand out of the display. "Got it," she said triumphantly. She held up a red plastic tub filled with play badges. Mike took a step closer and looked at them. The plastic emblems read, Freddy's Honorary Security. Vanessa plucked one of the badges from the tub and stepped over to Mike, smoothing the vest that, in spite of everything that had happened tonight, he still wore. Vanessa pinned the badge to it. Vanessa patted Mike's shoulder. Then she stepped back. Her gaze lifted to his face and then dropped again. There, she said in a tone that came across as oddly resigned. Now you're official. The words sounded tired and her tone dropped at the end of his sentence. Vanessa seemed to be almost sad. Why? Mike opened his mouth to ask what was upsetting her, but before any words came out, the beep, beep, beep of his watch alarm cut through the moment. It acted like a thrown bucket of cold water, putting a harsh end to the night. Vanessa looked at her own watch. Mike knew it would read 6 a.m. That's what his alarm was set for. Looks like our time is up, Vanessa said. She gave Mike a weirdly somber smile. Come on, let's go get your stuff. I'll walk you out. That's good to hear. Good to hear you're doing good. The storm had finally thrown in the towel. Flat, ashen clouds lay supine over the pizzeria, as if spent and depleted. Between a narrow gap in the clouds, a hint of the day's coming sun sidled over the tops of distant trees, casting surreal golden light over the wet black sheen of the pizzeria parking lot's broken asphalt. Mike's car door was protesting its required movement, with a clunking groan when an engine's drone and the swish hiss of tires rolling through shallow rain puddles turned Mike around. Vanessa's black and white Cruiser rolled to a stop behind him. She lowered her window. If you want, Vanessa called out, I can check in from time to time. I know how lonely these nights can get. Mike kept his face neutral, but inwardly he cringed. He liked Vanessa, even though her fickle personality made his head spin. The last thing he needed, though, was her dropping in unannounced. It would totally mess up his nighttime routine. Mike realized Vanessa was watching him with a bemused quirk of the lips and a raised eyebrow. He spoke quickly. I keep myself busy. Vanessa left her gaze on him for several long, inscrutable seconds. Then she shrugged. Some friendly advice? She narrowed her eyes. Don't let this place get to you. Just do your job and you'll be fine. Vanessa's intense stare and the hesitation before the word fine landed on Mike like a physical blow. Not a hard one, more like a warning tap. A shot across the bow. The bow. The bow, I don't know. Either way. It felt like Vanessa's words were more threat than advice. Ignoring the tightening in his gut, Mike said lightly, Sounds good. Vanessa gave Mike a friendly wave. There was that flip-flop again. Mike couldn't keep up. Then she raised her window. She looked straight ahead and drove out of the parking lot. Mike watched the cruiser's taillights for a couple seconds before getting in his car. As he started to close the car door, which let out a loud grinding sound, he thought he caught a hint of movement by the pizzeria. Mike leaned forward and looked through his windshield. Unfortunately, he couldn't see much. Leaves and pine needles were stuck to the wet glass. The wet hold on a second. Mouth's getting dry, so I gotta get a drink. There we go, let's try that again. Leaves and pine needles were stuck to the wet glass, and Mike's view of the restaurant was obscured. He hesitated as he considered whether he should get out of the car and go investigate. As quickly as Mike thought about checking out what he thought he'd seen, he dismissed the idea. The building was locked up tight. He was tired, and his arm hurt. Mike turned the ignition 4 times. Finally, the car started. He cleared the windshield with the wipers, and he looked toward the slovenly building again. It was still. Mike shrugged. His mind must have been just winding him up again. And that is going to be the end of this part of the book. I will, like I said, I will be reading chapters 11 through 14 either later today before I got something going on. I'm taking part in something that's gonna start at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be posting a link to it um, tomorrow, which is technically today, but you know what I'm saying. I'll be posting a link later today when everybody is more awake than they are now. So yeah. But next time on Five Nights at Freddy's, the plan that Jane and Jeff agreed to is going to come to fruition. But, and even though I know the answer is going to be, the question will be answered if you've watched the movie, but for those who have not seen the movie, the question I give, or read the book for that matter, the question I give you is, will they make it out alive, or will the animatronics or will something, I know I just kind of did that there, messed up there. Will they make it? Will they do their job correctly? Or will something happen that will leave them in that pizzeria forever? Kind of ominous, that question, if I hadn't fucked it up. But, but still, that's an ominous question to have. Will what do you call them? Will the vandalizers will the vandalizers get out of there with no problems, or will something possibly happen to them? You'll just have to wait and see for chapters 11 through 14. Or, if you're really the impatient bunch, you can always watch the movie on Peacock. I think it's still on Peacock, isn't it? I could have swore it's still on let me take a quick look, actually. Because if I remember correctly, they did have it on Peacock at one point, mainly because it came out, it was on Peacock, and they made it to where it would release on Peacock and it be released in theaters simultaneously. I may have to look it up later. If I have to, I'll just buy the DVD version of it, because I did enjoy the movie. It may not have been the best horror movie I've ever seen, but I think it did its job well to working, being the movie that the fans could enjoy. You know what I mean? I think it was a good movie for what it was worth, but not the best horror movie I've ever seen. Period. But that's beside the point. Anyway, I did say I was going to be doing this, but before I leave, I do have a bit of an announcement to make. So, as we all know, it is currently September 22nd, which means October is almost around the corner, which means horror. So, I have selected a number of horror books that I'm going to be reading for the month of October, some horror games that I'll be playing for the month of October. I don't know if I'll be able to get to them all before the month is out, but I will try. As well as movies for the month of October. So let's take a look at the books, since I already have them in my head, in my lap. I mean, not my head. What am I talking about? So the first book, and I got them set up in a way where it's from earliest release to the most recent. All right. So the first book in this pile is a book that came out in 1959 that would later get a movie adaptation of the book released in 1960, which means I will be reading and watching, and this is why I got this 2-pack, the very movie and the book of, let me see if I can do this right, Psycho. Yep, I got the book and the movie, and that's why I got them. And funnily enough, this will actually, I've heard about Psycho before, both the book being by Robert Bloch, and the fact that the book is actually based on the Wisconsin serial killer named Ed Gein. If you don't know who that is, and you're very curious, just read at your own risk, okay? Because he is not your typical serial killer. He is a bit different, shall we say. Not very... Yeah, we'll just put it like that. Just be mindful of what you're getting yourself into if you decide to read up on Ed Gein, okay? I'm just saying. But yeah, so there's that. I'll be doing these for the month of October. Also, I don't have the movie yet, and I don't know where I can watch it currently. But I do have the book, which is another book that I've heard of, but I've never really read it before. And kind of to go along with the near end of the summer season and going into autumn, Jaws by Peter Benchley. Yeah, I have seen the movie before, at least once or twice at least, and I do intend on getting the movie through Amazon, so that way I can watch it through here. So yeah, looking forward to reading this book, if I'm being honest. But, yep. Now, of course, we cannot have a Halloween season without a book by the master of horror himself, Stephen King. So, instead of reading a book that's about one story, why not read a book that has at least 20 separate short stories by the man? That's where this comes in. Stephen King's Night Shift. And I'll be honest, the main reason why I got the book was because it had Children of the Corn in it. And out of all of them, and I'm going to be doing a poll, and I made a list of the movies that have a movie adaptation based on these short stories that are not made for TV movies, but they were theatrically released movies to kind of shorten that list down. I'll be doing a poll and seeing what you guys think I should watch out of all of the movies that were that were released theatrically that I should watch. And we'll go from there. But now for the most recent one. This book has been said, even on the back, the book is said to be like a mix. It's basically like Lord of the Flies meeting Battle Royale. I have watched Lord of the Flies before. I have read the book before. I probably will read the book at some point. But for right now, I'm kind of backed up. I like how my books are stacked the way they are. It's kind of funny. Makes you get the optical illusion that there's more than there appears to be. But yeah, there's not a whole. There's a good amount of books there, but I'll be sure to get through them at some point. But yeah, this book, I don't know what got me into this book, honestly. If I'm being honest with everybody, because with this book, I just took a look at what it was about, and I was like, oh, this seems like a book I might be interested in, so I got the book, Fantastic Land. Yeah, that's the... God dang it. Yeah, that's the book I got, Fantastic Land. I guess you could say it is in its own way like Five Nights at Freddy's, because it does take place in something that's supposed to be fun, that's supposed to be fun, good times kind of deal. But it turns out this is a place filled with, this place has a history of horror related stuff to it. So yeah, those are going to be the 4 books I intend to read for the Halloween season. Now, let's talk about the movies. These, besides the movies here, the books here that have a movie adaptation, I do have other movies in mind. I will be doing a watch along video for the 4 weeks of October to fit with that. I will be um watching 4 horror movies on the weekend. Those 4 horror movies are, in no particular order, um, The Mummy, 1999's The Mummy, which is also why I bought the Mummy trilogy, which has the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies, which I grew up with, which I did grow up with. So there's that. Also, you have 2017's Get Out. But I'm kind of wondering if I should swap that out for another Jordan Peele movie that I did see, that I liked, that I did enjoy watching, because it gave that Alfred Hitchcock kind of ending, in my opinion. That being 2019's Us. But there's the second one with probably Get Out. Um, the third one is from 2008, and it's one of the most terrifying horror movies I've ever seen in my life. That being The Strangers, which I do think did come out in 2008. And finally, I gotta think about what the last movie, because like I said, I made a community post about it. I trying to remember what the final movie. Oh yeah, and because we gotta cater to the Halloween season, we gotta pick the original Halloween. We gotta pick the original Halloween. Come on, we just have to. Because it wouldn't be Halloween without watching Halloween. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. As a matter of fact, I will be I don't know if I will be watching the 1978 movie. I don't know if I'll be doing a back-to-back thing with the 2018 Halloween movie as well. I don't know, but well, I'll think about it. I'll probably think about it by the time we get to the end of the Halloween season there. But now for the video games that I'll be doing. Dead Space, for one. I'm basically going to be restarting Dead Space and The Last of Us, but I'll try to do it to where I play each game for a week, and then try to finish that game within that week. But if not, shit happens. Things can happen sometimes, so, we'll try to do with what we can do. But yeah, we got Dead Space, the remake, not the PS3 original, which I have no problem with. But I think the PS5 remake would make much better sense to play, considering it's more readily available to me, because I already own the copy of it. The Last of Us Part 1, not the PS5 version, I'll be playing the PS4 version, because I already have that version, so what would be the point of getting the PlayStation 5 version, unless they gave me the option to get the free PS5 upgrade on it, which I know they would not let me do, even if I wanted to do it. I'm even looking at it. I'm even looking it up right now. I guarantee you it will not let me download it for free because I don't have a thing there. But well, it does let me play a full trial on it. It won't let me do. Yeah, so it won't let me do an PS5 upgrade on the game. So there's that. But I do have a few games in mind that I got in my cart right now that I'm going to do. The other one being Alan Wake 2, which is currently on sale for $38.99 with the standard version. And So yeah, so we got Alan Wake 2 coming that I want to get for sure. Now, I was initially thinking of Alien Isolation, but now that I was seeing it being released, I'm currently thinking of Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Playing that game because it just recently came out. I'm thinking about that. The thing that's stopping me is the fact that getting both of those games would run me nearly $100. Yeah, I'm not kidding. That would really run me about $100. So that's gonna kind of suck. But I could probably find a way around not paying under. I mean, I could actually go on a GameStop right now. If I had the money, I could go to GameStop on their website and buy the digital codes buy the codes digitally and save some money because I am a pro on there. So yeah, there's that. So there's those three games, but the fourth one. What was that fourth one? I know I said it earlier. What was that fourth one? Um, shit. Oh, crap. What was that fourth one? Because I know I picked a fourth game, but I can't remember what the name of it was at the top of my head. And I can't look on my channel on YouTube to see what it is. Shit. What was it? Mm, I can't fucking remember. I'll look at it again and then I'll say, then I'll talk about it later. But either way, yeah. But those going to be four video games. My four video games, my four movies, and my four books that I'm going to be reading, watching, and playing. Well, playing, watching, and reading in that exact order, um, respectively, for the month of October. If you want more information, you can go on the community tab if you want to read more on what I'll be doing. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching this video of my reading Five Nights at Freddy's. Hope you guys enjoyed. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Forrest Walpole signing off.